Well, good morning once again, everybody. Jeff Slickey here, and I am happy to have, as we continue on through the session, not much longer actually, if we're looking at the calendar, State Senator Drew MacEwen. Drew, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me again, Jeff.
It is budget season. The numbers are starting to come out, and people are starting to kind of look deeply into some of these things. And I've seen a lot that is impacting the 35th district here. We could go in any sort of direction, but kind of something first here as I start looking at the weather forecast. Things are getting nicer and nicer. One of the things I'm seeing that could be on the chopping block are cuts to wildfire prevention. And this has been an issue that has just gotten worse and worse over these last couple years. In the 35th, especially, we've seen some big fires. And I've talked with your counterpart in the House, Dan Griffey, former firefighter, about the benefits of the prevention for these types of things. What can you tell me about this one?
Yeah, there were cuts made to the DNR's budget. They're the lead agency at the state level for when it comes to battling wildfires, and it's unfortunate because the previous DNR commissioner, Hillary France, worked real hard to get those levels up. And as we all know, prevention is much more cost effective than having to fight the fire. So disappointed to see that direction. Disappointed in a number of things, frankly, in this budget that. For a budget that came in, and again, I think it's important to point out that we have record revenues. As our the revenue growth is slowing, yes, but we are still at record revenues. But what's at issue here is the overspending that's occurred. And so, do cuts have to happen in the budget? Yes, but the cuts they're making are so wrong. Whether it's the firefighting or cutting funding to low propensity achieving schools that primarily service Native Americans, Hispanics, and then to justify that all by doubling your spending, growing that budget deficit and enacting $21 billion in new taxes. I mean, all the way around, this is just the wrong direction. Even the Seattle Times called this out in their editorial last week and said they summed it up by saying all the wrong moves. And nothing could be further from reality on that. That's this budget that was passed by the Senate Democrats this past Saturday is draconian to the residents of the state. And we offered a solution. We rolled ours out a week and a half ago. That we showed there's a path to be able to do this without draconian cuts and without having to raise taxes. And it's just unfortunate that they've chosen a path that the governor said from the beginning that these choices that they're making, he would veto. That includes funding for law enforcement. He also was adamant that a wealth tax is not sustainable and will hurt the growth of this state. And those two things they right off the bat they have in there. So we're supposed to adjourn in 4 weeks here at the end of the month. I'll tell you what, it's astonishing to me the gap between Senate Democrats, House Democrats, and the governor, and how they reconcile all this in the next 4 weeks. That ball's in their court.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. Kind of, if we look at it in a thirds perspective, we'll go with the Republicans, the Democrats, and the governor. If on the surface it seems like we'll say two-thirds have that being the governor, and the Republicans in the state house have kind of looked at this and said, for example, the wealth tax. If this isn't going to work, is he going to, do you believe, strike those down? Is he going to use his veto pen to go back to his caucus, if you will, and say, listen, I said from the beginning, this is not going to work. While you may not agree with everything that the Republicans have put forth, they have some ideas to work on this. Let's get, do we have to start over? Let's get a little bit going in here. Were any of the suggestions that you and your colleagues put forth adopted in any aspect on any of these budgets?
No, unfortunately not. None of them were. And as to whether the governor will veto, I mean, that's what he pledged. This will be a defining moment for his administration, and if he holds to his word on those things. And look, I get, it's easy. The Senate Democrats are running around saying, oh, the wealth tax, they got to pay their fair share. They're putting that out there so everybody sees that. But what they fail to also tell you is that your local property taxes can triple under their tax proposals. They've increased the fishing and hunting licensing fees. They've increased the cost of the Discovery Pass. There that the tripling of the property tax itself, had that been enacted 10 years ago, just to take some historical perspective on that, today your property taxes would be 60% higher. These are the things that people need to be paying attention to. I don't think the wealth tax is going to apply to anybody in Mason County or in the 35th, to my knowledge. But that's what they lead with as their banner. And again, the governor, was right to say that this is not a sustainable tax. I mean, in fact, France tried this, I believe, a decade ago, and they ended it because guess what? When you have taxes that are draconian like that, it drives behavior, and it drove wealth and spending out of their country. And why the state of Washington thinks it'll be different here. And just look at our capital gains tax that was passed. I voted against that. We said, this drives behavior. People will change. And subsequently, we saw the capital gains tax collection go from over $1 billion to under $300 million from one biennium to the next. It had a huge impact. And so this notion that this is going to magically fill the hole, that they frankly have created is wrong. And the other astonishing thing, again, when they're enacting $21 billion in new taxes, they spend every last dime. They leave $25 million at the end of the budget on this. That includes raiding the rainy day fund. $25 million is a lot to you and me and everybody that's listening to this. But put this in perspective. How can we relate to that as at the family level? The median family income in the state of Washington is around 77,000. Mason County, we're under that. We're around 58,000. This is the equivalent, though, of your family or any other family in the area leaving around $25 in their savings account for emergencies.
Wow.
That's the position that this state has put itself in. And it's done this for the last couple of bienniums. And I've spoken to this on the floor numerous times, that you can't do this. It's not sustainable. But yet the only thing that we seem to continue to learn from history is that we don't learn from history.
Are these the types of budget lines that people talk about? Well, if we don't spend all of it now, this session, next session, they'll say, well, you made good with that less amount, so we're going to lower it. And so they're just trying to keep pushing that forward. Is that how that works?
Well, I think we have a structural issue in how we budget in this state, and I firmly believe we need to go to zero-based budgeting. And what you're referring to is the issue that a lot of levels of government face is that, well, I had X amount last year, I have to have that plus this year. That's the wrong way to budget, and you need to be able to justify every penny from the beginning, and the zero-based budget approach does that. And this is an issue at the federal government as well. I think that's an irresponsible way to budget. I'd love to have that conversation that, let's justify every expenditure. And there's people that have been digging into our state operating budgets and starting to find their own things that are just astonishing. It blows the mind. I mean, there's a cut in this budget, $340 million to local hospitals, in a time when healthcare continues to be expensive. Mm-hmm. State employees, the other side is saying, oh, well, we accept their collective bargaining agreement. Yeah, the budget does, but what they fail to follow up with is they're mandating 13 furlough days a year on state employees, and so it's actually a cut to state employees. But you don't hear that part of it either. And our state treasurer even spoke out against this budget, and with the rate on the rainy day fund and an increase in taxes that are not a sustainable path, that this puts our AAA bond rating in jeopardy, and we use bonds for funding transportation and other capital projects throughout the state. And so if we lose that AAA rating, that drives the interest rate up on bonds, which ends up costing us more all the way around. In the time since I was first elected in 2012, I've not seen a more irresponsible budget than what I saw pass off the floor on the Senate Saturday.
And I was thinking about this, and one of the things you mentioned, transportation, and one of the things that's going around too is this 6 cents per gallon gas tax hike. Is that because the push for the hybrids and the EVs that are getting better gas mileage, so there's less coming in overall, or is this just an additional, let's see what we can get out of the gas tax? I think I saw a graphic yesterday online that said average price of gas in the state 414, average national price 314. And then I heard a guy at the gas station the other day go, "Well, I was in Texas and it's like 250,
Yep.
down there." I just don't, I still don't quite understand where the additional taxes in the state budgeting goes to when, for example, I was just driving over Highway 12 the other day, heading up to White Pass, and there are portions of that road which is a major thoroughfare for truck
Right.
traffic, and it's you're bumping along on some of these aspects. So where does that money go back in? What does that fund, I guess?
Yeah, so in the transportation budget that also was passed off of the Senate floor on Saturday, there's a six cent per gallon increase per gallon. But here's the kicker: it also has an inflation factor added to it, and so the legislature never has to vote on it again. It'll automatically increase. I believe it's 3% every year. And again, I think that's very disingenuous to do to the citizens of the state, to enact a new tax, or an additional tax, I should say, that then automatically is going to go up every year. And what the budget is doing then is bonding that revenue. And so you go out to the bond market and say, okay, our projections are, and I forget what it is off the top of my head. So for argument's sake, over the next 30 years, it'll be, however much money that is. And again, I apologize, I don't have that number right in front of me, but let's just say $10 billion over the next 30 years. So that goes out, gets bonded. So we collect it as a state. We get the money right away, minus the underwriting fees, et cetera, that happen in that process. And you're able to go out and do these construction projects. That in and of itself, I don't oppose in being able to use bond measures like that. I think that's a prudent way. You're able, just like most of us have a mortgage on our home, similar type of thing. It allows you to get there today using future revenue. But what I have an issue with and how the transportation budget has been done is that, yeah, it's an additional gas tax on the residents of the state. And we've proposed solutions over the past decade. Myself and others have proposed legislation that would have taken the sales tax from auto and truck sales and put that, instead of that going to the operating budget, it would have gone to the transportation budget. And had we done, and you do it incrementally because it is a hit to the operating budget, but if you did it incrementally over a decade, the economic growth of the state would absorb that in the operating budget over time. And had we done that 10 years ago, we'd be having $1.8 billion for road and safety maintenance on a regular biennium basis. But, so again, they're increasing the gas tax because on a per capita basis, the gas tax collections are declining because we've mandated, more fuel efficient cars, hybrids, right, EVs, et cetera. And so, again, tax drives behavior. So increasing the tax because the revenue is going down on it. What do you think is going to happen as we continue to go forward? And whatever technology there is, I would argue in the next 20, 30 years, it's going to be significantly different than what we're doing today. And I think there was just a better way to do this. But having said that, the transportation budget is much more of a bipartisan approach. And I'm grateful that we were able to work on things, including making sure the Belfair bypass stays funded, improvements at Wallace Neyland in Shelton. So there's some good things in there. I just believe there's a better way we could have paid for them.
Sure. One of the other things that folks enjoy in Mason County is across the country, Second Amendment right to bear arms. The state permit process to purchase firearms is advancing through your chamber there. Is there any slowdown on that? Is that just an additional, what's the reasoning you're hearing for that proposal?
Yeah, the legislature here has, over the past 6-7 years, been very aggressive in infringing on Second Amendment rights, and also in our state constitution, Article 1, Section 24, which is even more specific when it comes to firearm rights. But this legislature has continued to take the approach that they disagree with those constitutional amendments. I believe this is an infringement. What it does is it requires that you get a permit. You've got to go through a live training course, a fire range training course, have that permit before you're able to buy a gun. And you got to get the permit, if I understand the legislation correctly, each time you were to go and purchase a gun. And again, when you look at the crime in the state of Washington, I mean, the mixed messages that are sent here, you're punishing law-abiding citizens. And look, we all want to reduce gun violence and violence in general. No one disagrees with that. But again, it's another approach that is going to infringe on law-abiding citizens. And again, the mixed messages that this legislature sends when it introduces legislation to decriminalize drive-by shootings or to release early, have early release for juvenile murderers if they committed less than 3 murders. Suddenly, 3 is the magic number. I mean, this stuff's insane. And it just blows me away that they'll do that on one hand, and then on the other hand say that, oh, but you that are law-abiding, we're going to make it tougher. You know, I mean, when you look at the majority of crimes committed with firearms, those firearms were purchased illegally. This isn't going to change that pattern.
You and Representatives Dan Griffey and Travis Couture had a robust town hall last week.
Yeah.
A couple hundred folks sitting in there listening in. In addition to what we've talked about already, what were some of the other themes that people were concerned about on this?
Definitely the biggest theme in there was the tax issue. It really was. And, you know, we don't sit there and cherry pick which questions we're going to take. You know, we just let them come. And I mean, we're asked beforehand by those that they do a light screening to make sure people are asking us relevant questions to the state legislature. Sometimes people want to go off on the federal issues,
Sure.
Which we don't have any control over. But the tax issue was time and again kept coming up, as did you know, issues in education. You know, we have declining scores. That's a fact. And we've increased funding so tremendously and not getting the results out of it. That came up in there. But I would say overall, the biggest issue were the tax and fee increases. And this legislature just continues to be tone deaf to what's happening to, you know, everyday working families, that this is not affordable. I've had phone calls and correspondence this session yet again, especially from seniors that are getting priced out of their home. They've gotten it paid off, but the property tax increase is just killing. And to think that the local levy rates could triple under the legislation moving forward is just mind-boggling to me.
And then kind of dial in on that a little bit. Are you talking about the levies put forth by the different school districts could go up, or by the cities could go up, or is this like an overall property tax potential increase put out by the county or even the state? Where does this levy thing?
All the junior, for lack of a better word, all the junior
districts,
forms of government to the state would be able to exceed the 1% cap and go up to 3% or more. It's based off of inflation or and population change. So it's the higher of 3% or that. So that's what's really scary.
Okay.
And again, I've said time and again, it should, if you're an elected official and you're dealing with budgets, it is the people's money. It's not yours. It's not the government's money. It is the people's money, and it should be darn hard to do those budgets. And the notion that we'll just make it easy to raise taxes and not even have to ask the people, to me, just flies in the face of what our state was built around for over a century. And we're just going to disregard that and say, go at it, any unit of government, and don't worry about what the people think. Well, guess what? The people will speak, and it's going to be with their feet, unfortunately.
One final thing when it comes to education, you mentioned that there's not a lot of opportunity to dig into the federal side of things, but we're hearing about some potential federal cuts in education. And I do know, and I've seen some different graphs about the counties. Mason gets some of its money, perhaps more than other counties in the state federally, for some of the lower opportunity folks that you mentioned earlier, and some of the neighboring counties too get a higher percentage of federal funds when it comes to Native or Hispanic members in their districts. And then you said earlier in the conversation about some cuts that would be potentially coming on the state side of the budget.
Right.
How is that all going to play out, do you think? Are there going to, because these districts, some folks might say their budgets have swelled over time. There are the needs of these
Sure.
individuals that need them.
Yeah. Well, A criticism that I have of the administration at the federal level is there's a lack of clarity in how they explain things, and and when there's lack of clarity, that leads to confusion and fear, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's something they need to clean up at the federal level. But having said that, the way I understand the way they're looking at it, which no one seems to be talking about, is that, okay, if you get rid of the bureaucracy and you can more efficiently then send funds to the states to distribute as they see fit for various school districts, you would actually see a net increase. Now, are they going to be able to implement that? We'll see. Time will tell, and it's going to, there's a lot of moving parts to that equation, but that's the intent, that in this process of revamping the federal Department of Education, that's the intent to go in that direction. So again, I don't have any further insight. Everything that is out there is speculation, but I think the fear speculation has been overblown. And let's see how this plays out. But again, I can control to a certain degree, or at least have an input on what's happening at the state level, and that's my focus will remain. And until something significantly changes from the federal level, I'll reserve judgment till then.
Okay, I kind of see what you're saying there. A 20% cut across the board does not necessarily mean 20% cut from everything that trickles down there. It's kind of looking at maybe those top levels of, like
Right.
you said, the DC side of things. Well, very good. And we've got a few weeks left, as you mentioned, 4 weeks here. So we'll see what happens when the governor gets a little better clarity on those budgets that are coming through, whether or not they line up with what he said at the beginning of his term here, his first term,
Yep.
starting things off, and more input by Senate Republicans like yourself and the House Republicans, Dan Griffey and Travis Couture, who I'll talk with later this week. So, Drew, I really appreciate the time, and we'll talk again soon as we get closer.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Jeff. Have a great rest of the day.
You too.